Afternoon, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and I am in the midst of attempting to learn a new skill and learn to turn bowls on a pole lathe. I've gotten to where I can turn spindle type things on a pole lathe pretty well, but turning bowls is a whole different ball game, and I had to not only get a lathe that was set up for turning bowls, which I got from my buddy Tony Daniel after the gathering, but I also had to create the tools for bowl turning. So I had to fire up the forge to create those tools, and not really knowing what tools I needed, I started looking on the internet at different pictures of bowl turning type hook tools and kind of fashioned 3 different tools after those to get myself started. And I threw a practice piece on the lathe yesterday and chewed it up a little bit and tested a couple of the tools, and I made another one after that to go with the set. And I thought today I'd kind of walk you through what I'm doing to learn this process myself, because everybody starts somewhere on everything, whether it's starting fire, camping in the woods, or woodcraft like turning bowls on a pole lathe. So I thought I would walk you through part of my journey learning this process as I go. Stay with me. Alright, so once I have my tools made, I've got the lathe set up, I have to make a blank to turn on the lathe, and we need to start with some type of circular piece of wood that's kind of dome shaped on the back side. And you can see this is a piece of a log. Here's the other piece of it here. And you don't want to just cut the end grain off a piece of a log and use that round shape for turning a bowl. You've got that circular grain in there, not going to turn right for you. You need to use the face of that, cutting across the grain like this with your tools. So it takes a fairly large log to make a very big bowl. So I've taken this log and I've marked the center point here and put a compass on here, drawn a circle about the size of the inside of my bush pot. And I've cleaned the bark off and I've got a flat area here, and now I'm going to axe this down a little bit to get a semi-dome shape on here to start with. And this will be the inside of my bowl, and this will be the back side. Okay, so the next thing I've done is I've kind of taken chips off of here and kind of rounded this out a little bit, and according to Ben Orford and some of those guys that are really good at this, spending time to make sure this blank is pretty even and well balanced is pretty important in the beginning, especially. So I'm gonna spend some time to kind of make sure that this thing is fairly even thickness on both sides before I chuck it up in the lathe, and fairly round. And I'm doing that by just going through here and knocking the corners off, and I'm kind of dictated by this thickness where the curvature is here. So really having this thing that thickness all the way around the outside and nice and domed is what I'm after. Right? And this is just a piece of Osage orange that was given to me by Tony Daniel, and I put some lag screws in here and kind of wedged them off on a grinder, like 3 wedges. And you want to make sure that those wedges don't go along the splitting part of the grain. So you kind of want to turn that thing so that those wedges are going across the grain, and to get it in the center of the piece, get it seated in there, and then drive it home with a mallet. Smack it in there really good and tight, because this is going to be what your engine turns. This is your axle. This is only going to spin on the back side, and you need that so that your rope has somewhere to go to turn the piece, because you're not turning a spindle now, you're trying to turn this bowl. Alright, so the lathe itself is just like my other spring pole lathe. It has an engine that's a spring pole. It has a treadle pedal on the bottom, that's just a board. And then it has 2 poppets that hold the work in place, and in this case it's going to hold the mandrel on one end and the bowl on the other. And we need to get that bowl centered in there before we get too excited. We want that thing to be turning pretty even. Pound that in there and give myself a mark. And then I'm going to oil that a little bit and lock it in there. Alright, so I put a little bit of oil on here, and now I'm going to come in here and wrap my cord around and get this thing locked in the lathe for turning. I want to get right back in that same hole again, tighten everything up, keep my wedges in there tight, make sure that we're turning good. Looks pretty good. Looks real good, actually. Alright, now I've got a separate tool rest here that I can plug in. It's very much like a normal tool rest for a powered lathe. Not necessarily the perfect tool rest for this particular type lathe, but I find it does work because I can put it at an angle to get in there with the tools. And a little bit different on this lathe I've found, whereas you try to get, looks like right in the center of the piece with your tool rest, or just below center with a normal lathe. With this one, you're a little bit below that sometimes. So it's a little bit more of a manipulation with the tool than it is in the spindle type lathes when it comes to making bowls. It's just a little bit different, probably something you got to get used to, and I'm definitely not there yet. And again, I'm still experimenting with tools. So I'll get a close-up over here and we'll see what we can see. You know, a lot of this stuff for me is really about the learning and the trying to figure out how things work. Now I've got a hook tool here that I forged yesterday with a piece of rebar, and from what I'm seeing, that tool is held almost at 90 degrees to this workpiece, like that. And so now I'm just kind of playing with things to see where I need to hold this tool to get the most effect on the wood, to get the best cutting. And that's not giving me what I want. You can see that tool's not cutting very aggressively. And that could be my angle, or that could be the tool itself not being sharp enough. So I've kind of got to adjust a little bit, see where that needs to go to make that thing cut. Now you can see that's a whole lot different ball game. All I did was turn that thing upside down. Okay. Well, we're definitely cutting now. We weren't cutting before, so now we just got to kind of play with this and ease into it and see how it works out. But you've got to move this thing. I don't think you can just sweep this tool across. I think you have to actually move it backwards. Otherwise you're going to get an indention in the bowl, because that's what happened to me when I was working on my practice piece with another tool. Okay. Some of it looks really good, some of it looks a little rough. Part of that could be the sharpness of the tool, part of it could be my tool angle. It all comes into play with these lathes, and it's just a matter of dialing everything in. And again, practice, 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 and I'm not even close to being where I need to be yet. But I do want to try a different tool on here as well. But I want to kind of raise this rim up a little bit further first.